Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Blueprint Roundtable series. Today, Krissy and I, and maybe a guest surprise, we're not sure, will be describing what's the fastest way to effectively onboard a new hire. Krissy, I'll kick it to you first.
I feel like you have a really good insight into this. Do you want to answer first or do you want me to answer first?
Well, I can take the first stab at it.
Okay.
Been a little while since I've had to do that. Ultimately, I think the best way to onboard a new hire, it's really going to depend on their background, their level, whether they've got industry experience or holistic experience to the role they're moving in. But what I found is the faster you can get individuals shadowing peers in the real day-to-day thick of it, whether it's some type of operation or process, or if it's shadowing calls or a mix of the two, that has always been, whenever I've pulled people going through some type of new hire onboarding class, that's always been the number one most effective thing. So basically, if you could do it via Zoom or if you can do it in person, even better. But shadowing somebody going through live fire scenarios has typically been the best. I think a lot of times onboarding programs take a little too long to get there. It's like the end of week 2, sometimes the start of week 3. I really think that should be supplemented from day one. Outside of, they can always study up on the industry, the value props, the products, things of that nature, uh, in tandem. But the first week doesn't need to be fluff where they're sitting in siloed recorded trainings, or meeting with people that aren't in the seat that they're actively stepping into. So that would be my advice. I think there's other things you can do to help people get there even faster. If they're transitioning industries, let's say somebody's moving from fintech to martech, if you've got books or blogs or podcasts, whether it's something drawn up, maybe the CEO wrote a book, or maybe it's just an external podcast by an external party, right? That covers everything in this scenario, martech. It'd be good to just provide that to them as soon as they sign the offer letter, with no expectation that they're actually going to sit down and read everything or listen to everything. But I think you'll find individuals that want to succeed would love to devour some of that information that helps make a transition into a different industry easier, instead of assigning that stuff as a nice to have week 2 to, day 60. You can get them sort of advanced and prepped up that way. So I know this kind of high level, a couple of ideas. I'll kick it to you, Krissy, and then I can tie us off at the end.
There's two things to effectively onboard someone quickly, like to get them up to speed. Number one, when we talk about recruiting and hiring, that includes onboarding. And if you have a way that you want to hire someone and you are not, and that's not all aligned with your onboarding, and I'll explain what I mean by that, that's where a lot of things miss the mark. So I say that because a lot of times people are like, I want a self-starter. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I want a self-starter. I want someone who can hit the ground running. And a lot of times what they mean by that, though, is I want someone who doesn't need onboarding, but I'll have onboarding there. So like those things aren't aligned, right? Like this idea, like no one really wants to take the time to train people, which ultimately is why so many individuals fail, right? They want that's why you focus on experience over skills and behaviors, because you're hoping that experience will make someone do well. And so I think if you care about onboarding, then you need that to be aligned for what you're assessing through the interview process. So you can make sure that it's set up to actually help those people, like actually take advantage of those skills, right? That you were assessing for, to get them up to speed, right? Is the first piece in kind of high level. And then the second piece is you've got to have like clear outcomes that you want to achieve. So it's one thing to have a schedule that's organized, which is great, and you need that. But if it's just like, okay, they shadow here, they shadow there, it's like, what do you, by the end of month 1, what do you want them to have achieved, right? So that's how you can really tell, like within the first 90 days, you should be able to understand what someone is capable of, like in action, right? Separate from the interview. So, hey, in month 2, it might make sense for them to start showing that they can build pipeline and be on discovery calls. And so give them a pipeline target. And these are things that you don't have to do individually. Like you can create it one time. But I think, what are the skills and behaviors that are going to make someone successful in this role? And then those are the things you really want to elevate during onboarding, right? So we need people that are really good at active listening and asking discovery questions. Well, they need to, have that chance to do that within the first 30 days over and over again, from shadowing to, driving some of the conversations with potential prospects, or, with their clients, whatever role you're in. We're talking about sales in this example, but it's kind of my 2 cents on the matter. Emily, what do you think?
I mean, I would say process is so important. It doesn't have to be incredibly intricate. It doesn't have to be at par with like a Fortune 500 company, but having some sort of process for new hires to follow is very important because I think it allows you as the company to measure whether or not this person is actually going to be able to be successful in the role much quicker than maybe the first quarter after they are ramped and maybe they don't hit quota. You're able to really standardize that approach and understand. We actually saw some red flags in the onboarding process compared to what our expectation was. The second piece is for individuals, having some sort of onboarding process that you can follow helps you ramp very quickly and ultimately be better prepared to hit your number, which if you're in that role, that's really the most important thing, is what can you do to expedite your ability to start closing revenue, and onboarding is really critical to that. And having a process is the only way to standardize that and standardize the experience across everyone that's entering into the organization. So I would say even if it's simple,
Yeah.
even if it's just 30 days, having some form of process that everybody knows about and that is also something that continues to evolve is really important to have, especially in early growth.
Yeah, I think
but also
I
continuing
think that's
as the
spot
company
on. I think
scales.
one thing
But
came to me. And I'm a
that's
much
my
more
2 cents.
tactically minded individual. Hearing you two talk about
Yes, you are.
hear about the strategy. I think one thing that always resonated well for the three of us when we worked at two of our three previous stints in ICA and leadership roles. There and it really, even like the larger the company, sometimes the better here. But I think when you introduce individual contributors specifically to the leaders of other departments and orgs, I think that goes a long way of helping them, both parties, establish trust in each other, right? In what those roles and responsibilities are. John Gleason, name shout out, did a great job of this with CSMs while we were all at Motive. And he carved out time to meet everybody one on one, and he had rules of engagement clearly outlined so that everybody knew from day one, this is my role versus my responsibility versus my counterpart in another department. And when you scale that out across, marketing, product, sales engineering, if it exists, BDR, SDR leadership, CS, you can empower somebody within week one to feel confident that, hey, if I have questions for another department, I've already been in contact in a quick one-on-one or introduction with leaders of those other departments. And the sooner somebody is comfortable with being able to do that, I think the sooner they're going to settle into the seat and feel confident when it's time to hit the ground running. So that's, if I'm going to give out like tactical tips and tricks, and that's one I would recommend to anybody, regardless of the size of the organization. But that's something that has gone a long way in the past.
Yeah, I think those are all great tips and can be helpful. Onboarding matters, and I think there's no way to get around it, but it's something that makes a difference. And it also will engage your employee, right? Like to be in it for, if that this is where a lot of employees start to also make their exit to some extent, like, oh, what I'm seeing I don't like because like no one's talking to me or like helping me. So I think in this new world, it used to not be that way, but now with so many opportunities, and it's still really competitive, it's important from an experience standpoint. Obviously different company sizes are going to provide different experiences, and you should make sure that an organization is aligned with like what a candidate can actually do and what their expectations are for that onboarding experience. But all that to say, I think that these are great tips. So
Yeah. And
that's all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
Oh, go ahead.
We'll take it from here. Krissy, don't you worry about this outro. What I'd like to say to our listeners, those of you out there, if you have questions or need help either reviewing a current onboarding process or outline, or you're looking for advice, any of us are more than happy to do it. We've all crafted it both for companies we worked at and then from a third-party consulting type standpoint as well. Happy to hop on a call and help anybody that needs it. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for listening. We look forward to having your ears next time. And shout out to our special guest, Emily. Appreciate you showing up.
Thanks, you all. We almost made it to under 10 minutes, but Matt couldn't help himself. So
that was one of the best outros we've ever had.
See you later.